All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's virtual field trip. I love all the dancing out there. You can do the Monarch dance. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is GOB. You're watching the Geo Show. Just a quick introduction for everyone. If this is your first experience on the show, this is an interactive virtual field trip. We have classrooms going to ask live questions, but even if you're not on camera with us today, you can send in your questions. I highly encourage you to do so. You can do that using the Q&A app built right into your Zoom window, or if you're on Twitter, teachers, you can send in your questions to #GeoShow. Also, we use Kahoot on our programming. And if you've never used it before, just go to kahoot.it, enter in today's game pin, which is 52793. Again, 52793. You'll be linked right up to our survey and quiz questions throughout the show. And pay attention, explorers, if you win today's Geo quiz at the end of the show, you'll win a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World Studios. All right, and we also use Flipgrid with our program for after the show. So if you stump me on any questions, look, mine aren't butterflies, guys, or fantastic animals. I love them to death, but I don't know every single thing there is to know about them. Right off the top of my head. So if you stump me on any questions, great, you're asking fantastic questions. I will research those answers and post them over to flipgrid.com/GeoShow on our Monarch board for the rest of the week. All right, so we are going to get started, but I want to know from you guys, explorers, are you guys ready? All right, GeoShow is now live. Let's do it, guys. All right. Welcome, all explorers. You're now watching the Geo Show, and the title of today's program is Magnificent Monarchs, brought to you by Learn Around the World, bringing you guest speakers and virtual field trips just like this one from all over the globe. All right, we're going to kick off today's show with a survey question. So if you're playing along using Kahoot, go ahead and grab those devices. Make sure you get logged in. Again, that game pin today is 52793. Again, 52793. Here's how we use Kahoot here on the Geo Show. So you only get 10 seconds to answer, so not a lot of time. Also, if you've never used it before, you have to look up on the screen. If you look down at your devices, you won't see the questions. So you have to see the questions up here on the screen. If you're quiet in class, I know it's hard, but if you're quiet, you can actually hear me read the questions as well. Now, we won't give out points into our quiz at the end of the show, so you have time to get logged in. If you're not logged in yet, don't worry, but we must go ahead because the show must go on. So we're going to go ahead and launch today's first survey question. And our first survey question is, where do the monarchs in North America go during the winter time? Where do the monarchs in North America go during the winter time? Do they go to red Mexico, blue California, green Florida, or yellow all of these locations? All right. It's kind of a trick question, so it's actually yellow, all of these locations. I'm so happy that most of you knew Mexico. Most of them do go to Mexico. So about 80% or so of the monarchs are going to be headed down to Mexico, but not all of them make it there. There are some other locations that they do go to, and we'll talk about all of those and more on today's Geo Show. But because Geo Show is a geography-based program, we like to say location matters. So let's find out where we're going to on our virtual field trip today, because we're going to focus on one of those locations, and we're going to focus on Mexico. That's where we're going to visit for our virtual field trip. So the monarchs, when they leave North America or Canada and the USA, I should say. When they leave Canada and the USA on the eastern side, we'll talk more about this, but they go to a very small place in central Mexico. So they go to just one of a few sites. Now, these different sites can range by numbers depending on how many monarchs go down there every year. So it can be like 8 to 11 overwintering sites. And these overwintering sites are primarily, which I have them marked here with little monarch butterflies, but these are in the mountain ranges of central Mexico. And they are in 2 states in Mexico. So we have this red highlighted state, which is the state of Mexico. So Mexico has states just like the United States of America. There's the United States of Mexico, and they have states in the state of Mexico in red, and right next door to the west, highlighted in orange here, is a lot larger, is the state of Michoacan. The majority of the monarchs go to the state of Michoacan. Again, the majority of the monarchs go to Michoacan. All right, and in fact, about 80% of all the monarchs that do come here go to just one of a few of the overwintering sites. So these are these are the largest ones that they primarily go to, right on the edge of the border, but it's primarily in the state of Michoacan. So this is the location that we're going to be traveling today. And why is it such a unique spot? Well, this mountain range is called the Transcontinental Belt. So it's a mountain range that goes east to west right here in central Mexico, and it provides the perfect habitat for our monarchs to overwinter in. So it's not too hot, not too cold, just the right amount of moisture for them, because they're not doing anything the entire winter. They're just hanging out in the trees and until springtime, which is right about now, guys. So the monarchs are heading north. We'll talk about that migration, but they are coming back to see us. So I am super excited to see my first monarch of the year. It's going to take a little bit longer for me, but they are leaving this area where we see the red star right now, and they are currently traveling north to come see us all. And before we get started and go see where they spend the winter time and talk about the migration and all the other things that we're going to talk about today on our virtual field trip, we do want to introduce our guests' classrooms that we have with us today. First up, we have Mr. Travis's first graders from Mattawan, Michigan. Welcome to the show, guys.
Okay, say hi.
Say hi.
Hi. All right, and does anyone from Michigan have a fun fact about monarchs you would like to share today?
They are poisonous.
Right, they are poisonous. And that's a great one. Do you have a second one? Go for it.
They fly 50 to 100.
50 to 100? What, like by the bunch of them together?
Say it one more time. 100 miles a day.
Okay, 50 to 100 miles a day. Awesome. So thank you for those 2 fun facts. We got a double whammy there. So monarchs, we're going to talk about this today a lot, actually. So monarchs are poisonous, but we'll go ahead and give everyone a little hint. It's not the monarch butterfly that actually makes the poison. We'll come back to that. So some of you may already know this, but it's really cool how they become poisonous in the first place. All right, a second classroom we have along with us today is Mrs. Flanagan's first graders from Naples, Maine. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and I know we had a late spot filled here. Does anyone have any fun facts about monarchs from your classroom that you would like to share?
Butterflies come out of chrysalis.
Right, so I'm so glad you guys know this. So monarchs do not make cocoons. Monarchs do not make what? Right. They do not make a cocoon. They make what's called a chrysalis. So we're going to talk about the chrysalis as well today. Great fun facts. Awesome. I could just get all of you guys to teach the show today. And we have, last but certainly not least, Mrs. Gardner's third graders from Rathdrum, Idaho. Welcome to the show, guys. Hi. All right. And do we have any fun facts from your classroom today?
Depending on the temperatures in summer, the caterpillar stage continues for 9 to 14 days.
All right. So yeah, so it's hard, we get lots of questions sometimes. How long are they a caterpillar? How long are they this or that? It depends. We hate that answer, right? It depends, but sometimes it does. Some because of temperature or moisture, or just each little caterpillar is their own little caterpillar, so they like their own little time schedule, right? So we do have a range. Great fun facts coming from all around, and what's important to talk about is over in Idaho, our classroom today is you guys have a little bit different migration with the western monarch. So we'll talk a little bit about it today, but we're going to focus on the eastern monarch today because that is the largest migration of the monarch butterfly. Welcome to everyone. We also have lots of many other classrooms watching from outside today. I encourage you to get your questions sent in early and often, and we'll give a first random shout out today for East Elementary Schools down in South Carolina. So a big shout out to everyone down in East Elementary, where we're going to start off today's program. And we're going to talk about the migration. So talking about our classrooms over in Idaho, they get the western monarch. Our classrooms in Michigan, South Carolina, Maine, they're going to see the eastern monarch. So what's the difference between these two migrations? Well, you know, I like to call it the Great Monarch Migration. This is truly, it's the largest insect migration, and it's definitely one of the great migrations of the animal kingdom. So if we look here, you can't talk about the migration without first talking about the life cycle. And I like to split them up into a normal life cycle. So this is the life cycle of the monarch that we see all summer long, the one that we just heard about with the caterpillar. And then we have the migrating life cycle. So the last generation, every single year, they stop mating. So the life cycle delays. So the adult butterfly ends up living longer. So on the normal life cycle, the adult butterfly only lives, so all summer, the monarchs that you see, the adults only live for about 2 to 6 weeks. Again, there's a range there. Some of them longer, some of them shorter, but about 2 to 6 weeks. The migrating butterfly. So once the last generation, every single year, and they start migrating to Mexico, now this adult butterfly is going to live for the next months until about 8 or 9 months are going to live until they start the migration north. So the butterflies that we see that return to us coming up over the next month or two, they're the same butterflies that left our homes last fall. They're still living a lot longer than 6 weeks. So if we look at the life cycle, hopefully this is a review for many of you, or maybe our younger classrooms are just learning this, but just like other insects, there are 4 life cycles of the monarch butterfly, or 4 stages of the life cycle. 1 life cycle, 4 stages. The first stage is the egg. And when they lay their egg, mommy butterflies, or monarch butterflies, lay about 300 eggs. Whoa, that's a lot of eggs, guys. And they are an egg for about 3 to 4 days. And they're really, really small, about the size of a pinhead. And then the next stage of the life cycle is called the larva stage. Now, the larva stage of a butterfly happens to have another name. We call it the caterpillar. Most of you know the caterpillar, but it's called the larva stage. And during this stage, as we learned earlier, 9 to 14 days, right? This is just as good as 10 to 14. And so they're at this stage for about 2 weeks or so. And I got to tell you guys, these guys are hungry. They are very hungry caterpillars. How hungry are they? They're very hungry. And our third stage is called a chrysalis, that we just learned about. The pupa stage is called the chrysalis for the monarch butterfly. So some other insects have cocoons. The monarch butterfly does not have a cocoon. It has a chrysalis. And then they have the adult butterfly. The chrysalis is about 14 days. My monarch that I helped raise this last summer, mine was about 10 days, but I have heard tales of the chrysalis stage going up to 20, 28 days. So again, these are ranges. These are going to be averages. And the last stage is the adult butterfly that we just talked about. Typically it's 2 to 6 weeks, but the migrating butterfly is going to live for much, much longer. In fact, up to 9 months during the migration. All right, so why do they migrate, or what happens? So somewhere around the end of summer, early fall, the butterflies that we see around our homes are going to stop mating, and they're going to stop laying eggs, and they're going to start heading south. So sometime in late August, late September, they head south. We're talking about the eastern monarch now. And so if we look at the entire population throughout Canada and the USA, the eastern monarch, the majority of them are going to Mexico. Our friends out in Idaho today, probably most of the monarchs they see are going to be headed down to Southern California. But we're going to focus today on the ones in Mexico. Now, why are they going to California and why don't they all go to Mexico? Well, there's a mountain range going in the western part of the United States. And for everyone that doesn't know out there, let's see, our classroom in Idaho probably knows this. What mountain range is that called? All right, so maybe they didn't hear it. The Rocky Mountains. So the Rocky Mountains separate, they pretty much act like a big wall that separates the eastern and the western migrations. So the eastern monarchs are going down and they are getting funneled down into Mexico from the Gulf of Mexico and the Rocky Mountains. These two features funnel the butterflies into Mexico. And again, it takes them, some of them are going to be flying over 5,000 miles from Canada, and they're getting funneled because of the mountains and the water into Mexico. And some of them, however, will be going down into Florida. So Florida actually has a population, as we learned from our survey question, of monarchs all year round as well. But the ones we're focusing on today is the majority of them that are going down to our overwintering sites in the state of Mexico and the state of Michoacan. Now, they're just hanging out in the forest. We're going to see one of these overwintering sites, and they're not doing much of anything at all, and they're just hanging out the entire winter. And then right about now, guys, the first reports were coming out March 8th. So just a few days ago, they've been reporting in large numbers. The migration is starting right now. How exciting is that? So what these are going to do, the same butterflies that left Maine, Michigan, South Carolina last fall, they have been hanging out in Mexico all winter. They're heading back right now, and then they're mating as well, and they're going to lay their eggs somewhere around Texas or northern Mexico. Now, this generation is going to die, so the migrating butterfly is about to die shortly. I know it's sad, but life goes on, and their children are going to keep going north, and now we're back on the normal adult life cycle. So the adults that start heading north to South Carolina from Texas, they're going to be living for 2 to 6 weeks. And then the the grandchildren of the migrating ones are going to be heading north up to Maine. And after all summer, they are going to then head back down south. So that is a brief overview of the migration. And so on our virtual field trip today, we are going to Mexico. So let's go ahead and check out the overwintering sites. Now, we didn't have time on our expedition to go to all of them. There's just too many to see. Instead, we went to one. And the one that we learned in the introduction, we went to a overwintering site in the state of Mexico. And so it's one of these more southern ones because this one was a little bit closer from Mexico City. So this is Mexico City over here. And we actually did our expedition over to the overwintering sites here. Now, what are they doing here? They're just roosting, and the colonies tend to hang out on the southern side of the mountains, and that's because it gets more sunlight. All right, so the sunlight hits the southern side of the mountains in the northern hemisphere, and so that's why they're hanging out there. So for today's virtual field trip, we're going to leave Mexico City and head over to our overwintering site that we're going to see in the state of Mexico. So that's the route we're going to take. And just like that, abracadabra, we're going to go down on the ground. Hope you guys brought your passports today because we're going international, guys. All right, so now we're at the overwintering site, or one of the overwintering sites. We're at the trailhead. Just to point out a couple of things before we start hiking up into the forest to see the monarch butterflies is you see lots of cars. There's buses down in this parking lot. So the monarch butterflies are important to the local people for cultural reasons, but also for economic reasons. So lots of people from all over the world come to see the monarch butterflies, and all over Mexico. You know, there were more locals here from Mexico than international people that I saw on the day that we were here. Other important things about the economy here, locals bring up lots of food. We see coolers here. They sell delicious home-cooked food, tamales, tacos, tortas. So torta is like a sandwich. And you can also choose to take up a horse. So you can rent horses here, and we actually chose to take a horse up because we had lots of heavy camera equipment. But I gotta admit, guys, next time I go back here, I'm not gonna take a horse up. It was kind of scary because the trails are kind of narrow. As you can see, this girl going up on her horse on the switchback. These switchbacks are kind of high up, and then when you're sitting on top of a horse, if you guys have ever been on a horse, you're 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and you know, it's just, I would rather be on my own 2 feet personally. But you can only take the horses up so far. You can't go all the way up. And if we start looking around the forest here, so it's predominantly a pine forest. So this is a pine forest that they come to. We'll talk about why this may be important, or why this may be an attractive place for them to come with all of these pine trees as we start to see the monarchs. As we can see, lots and lots of people that are here. And then I wanted to just point out one quick thing again there. As we start looking here, you see all these people coming up, and you see that yellow tape in the background. Well, it's not crime scene tape, all of you crime TV fans. This is just tape to keep people out or keep them on the trail. So if you do a lot of hiking in the US, you may have heard of something called leave no trace. And that's the idea that we want to protect the forest that we are spending our time in. And especially when you have lots of people coming to one spot, in the case here with all the monarch butterflies, then it's important that we protect the forest as much as possible. So the local people here, this is how they are managing the forest here and managing all of the tourists. Because as we're hiking up here, look at all these. I mean, there's lots of people that come here to see the monarch butterflies. And right there, what do you guys see on the tree? Right, a butterfly. So a monarch butterfly. Now we're going to see lots of monarch butterflies, but before we start seeing the rest of their friends, I just want to point out a couple of things. So the overwintering site that we're at Piedra Hirada. This is just one of the 11 or so overwintering sites. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. It just depends on the population of butterflies that come every year. We'll talk about that later as well. And as we start to see the butterflies, you're going to start to see them all over the place, and the entire forest will turn orange because of that beautiful orange color. And we'll talk more about why maybe they have that orange color. And you know what? How about like right about now? So does anyone know why they're called a monarch butterfly? And it has to do with that orange color. And I'll give you a hint. So a monarch is another name for a king or queen. So a ruler is referred to as a monarch. So the monarch butterfly is named, or was named, after one of the monarchs from Europe. So my survey question for all of you today is, which monarch was the monarch butterfly named after? Which monarch was the monarch butterfly named after? What do you guys think? So we're going to use Kahoot to do that. Again, that game pin today is 52793. Again, this is a survey question, so if you're not logged in, you have opportunities to do so as we go on. So who's monarch butterfly named for? Was it the monarch of Italy, Spain, France, or England? All right, so if you said green, England, you are correct. So they were named after the monarch of England. In fact, they were named after King William III. So King William III of England was actually originally from Holland. And if you've ever seen the World Cup or any other international sporting event, Holland usually wears orange jerseys. It's like their country color. Well, he was called the Prince of Orange. It means he came from Holland, and his nickname was the Prince of Orange. So when Europeans started to come over to North America, then they started to see this beautiful orange butterfly everywhere, and they named it after, they started calling it the monarch butterfly because it was an orange butterfly, Prince of Orange, the monarch butterfly. So that's where we get the common name today, the monarch butterfly. So when we go back and we look at our monarch butterfly, and when we start talking about scientifically, why does it have that bright orange color? Well, it's like a warning sign. As we learn in our fun facts, that monarch butterfly is actually poisonous. And the more we hike up, so it's like a warning sign to other animals. And the more we hike up into the forest, we start to see more and more monarch butterflies, all in the trees, all on the ground. Let's keep hiking, guys. All right, so once we get closer and closer to the colony, so these very large groups of butterflies are called colonies. What are they called? Colonies. All right, great job. You guys are doing great. So once we get close to the colony, we start to see butterflies everywhere. We see them in the sky. We see them on the ground. And right here, we see a bunch of them on the ground. And this monarch butterfly to the right actually has part of its wing that is missing on the back left-hand side. Do we have any guesses? Let's go up to Maine. What do you guys think? Why might this butterfly be missing part of its wing?
Because it flew into the trees and maybe it took out a piece of the wing.
Okay, maybe it flew into something, or maybe something hit it. Maybe like a car hit it. We just don't know. Let's go over to Michigan. Do you guys have a guess?
What do you think?
Right, so lots of different guesses we're yelling out, and people are chiming in over on our chat. Maybe an animal coming from Mr. Falk's class, and that would be my guess. My guess would be it was probably an animal. Why? Because as we learn, they're actually poisonous. And let's ask Mrs. Flanagan's classroom, Mrs. Gardner's classroom. Let's go over to Idaho. Why do you think something may take a bite of this and not eat the rest of it?
Because if they ate the rest of it, it would. If they ate the rest of it, it would be poisonous, and the animal would most likely die.
Right. So they are poisonous. And do you guys know where they get their poison from? I mentioned this earlier. They do not create it themselves. They get it from something else. Who knows?
Colin?
Birds.
Okay, so maybe birds, or this is something really cool. In fact, they get it from their food source, So the caterpillar, the monarch butterfly, only eats one type of food. Does anyone know what type of food that the monarch caterpillar only eats? So I see lots of hands in Mrs. Flanagan's classroom. Do you guys know?
Owen, do you remember?
It gets it out of flowers.
What was it that we put in the cage?
Milkweed.
Right, milkweed. Virtual high five to you, buddy. So milkweed. You're going to hear me say this a lot today. The most important thing that we can do as people to help out the monarch butterfly is to plant milkweed, because milkweed is the only food. It's the only single food that the caterpillar eats. Now, the adult butterfly eats nectar or drinks nectar from any flowering plants, but the caterpillar will only eat milkweed, and milkweed is what is poisonous. So how cool is that? The caterpillar eats milkweed for about 2 weeks. Remember, he's a hungry caterpillar. He eats lots of milkweed. Any of you that's raised caterpillars in your classroom, you know this. You have to put lots of milkweed in there. And they eat all of this milkweed, and that poison stays in their exoskeleton. Can you guys say exoskeleton?
Exoskeleton.
Right, so insects have exoskeletons, not endoskeletons like we do. I don't even know if that's a word. So they have exoskeletons. That's where they keep their poison. So it's in the around their body. It's in their wings, the exoskeleton of their wings. And they go from caterpillar inside their chrysalis. They go through that metamorphosis. Our older classrooms, you can remember that word. Younger ones, don't worry about it. But they change from a caterpillar to an adult butterfly. And through that whole process, they keep that poison from the milkweed in them, even down in Mexico. So they do not have a lot of predators. In fact, usually, typically when something bites a monarch butterfly, they're like, bleh, bleh, bleh. They're like, this does not taste good. However, there are two birds that do eat monarch butterflies. One is the oriole. Any fans of the Baltimore Orioles out there? So the oriole, and there's a grouse that also eats them. And they actually have a pretty cool adaptation, a behavioral adaptation. They figured out how to basically split open. They'll catch them and split them open and only eat out the insides, because most of the toxins are located in the exoskeleton. So just a little bit of extra fun facts for you guys with monarch butterflies eating milkweed and being poisonous. All right. So when we go back, let's go back to the colony at Piedra Hirata, and let's take a look at our colony in more in depth. Okay, so here we see that guy with a broken wing down on the right, and we see them together. That was, in fact, a male. I'll tell you how to tell the difference between a male and a female here shortly. And if we look across the forest, does anyone see anything in the trees?
No. Yes.
No? Do you see anything? Look at this tree right here, guys. Look at all the limbs. Look how far they're drooping down. Why is that?
It's all the butterflies.
Butterflies, thousands and thousands of butterflies, guys. Let's go over closer and look up at some of these trees. Everyone see those big clusters up on the trees? Look at all those butterflies that are flying around. In fact, some of these clusters have so many butterflies on them that they just get so heavy that the limbs droop down towards the ground. And that's why these pine trees are important, because they're actually softwood. Pine trees are softwoods, not hardwoods. I'm going to freeze it right here. Everyone look right here, the trunk of this tree. Do you guys see anything on the trunk of this tree? Butterflies, guys. I cannot even see the bark of this tree. I don't know if you can see the bark. I can't see the bark because there's so many butterflies on this tree. So there's just butterflies covering all of these trees, on the tree trunks, clusters of them up on the limbs. When we start looking up in the sky, you see them flying around. Now, what they're doing is they're just hanging on to the limbs, and we call this a pretty interesting verb. We say roosting. Can you guys say roosting? Okay, so when we say what are they doing at the overwintering sites in Mexico, they are roosting. So we'll start to see them. So I was down on an expedition, not this year, but it was same time in early March. And this is what's happening, guys. Right now, they're flying around. They're starting to become more active because they're preparing for their journey north. And what they're doing is they're starting to mate. They're flying around. They're in search of water before they start the migration north. So you see lots of them on the ground. And what happens is, because the weather is still fluctuating, meaning the temperature is going up and down, sometimes the sun goes behind the clouds. Monarch butterflies, it needs to be fairly warm. So it needs to be around 60 degrees or so for them to be able to fly. And if it's really sunny outside, it's really bright, it can be down in the 50s for them to fly around. But so what happens is many times in early March, they'll start to fly around in the sunlight. But then when the clouds go in, it gets real cold and they're kind of stuck on the ground until it warms back up. So that's why you see a lot of them on the ground and in the shrubs and on the bushes. And so one of the ways they communicate with each other is they give off a chemical pheromone, but they also, by the way of them opening and closing their wings. And when they open their wings, we see that dark orange color on their backs, and the entire forest will turn orange from the monarch butterflies. So not only the butterflies, but as we can see here, so many people, it's these traffic jams of hikers that are in the forest because everyone's looking up to take pictures of the monarch butterflies. And not only them, but there's also scientists that come here and they're collecting data, as we see this gentleman doing. And this is where they actually count the entire North American or the eastern monarch population every single year. We'll talk about how many of them were down there this year in just 1 minute. But as we look up to the sky, and I'm going to do something, I'm going to turn up the volume here. And I want everyone to, I like to often say we use deer ears here on the Geo Show. So if you cup your hands, so make spoons with your hands, not forks, but cup your hands, put them behind your ears, and then point your deer ears towards the speakers. You'll be able to hear really loudly. Really cool adaptation we're going to add to you guys right now. But I'm going to turn the volume up and listen to what it sounds like, guys. This is not raining. Look, there are no rain clouds in the skies. This is the sound of thousands and thousands and thousands of monarch butterflies flying around our heads right now. And you just heard lots of wows. And I was saying that too. This is really one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life and been a part of. And just to review a couple of words here. So again, the butterflies, when they're hanging out in the trees, what are they doing? Starts with an R. Who remembers that word? Roosting. Okay, so they're roosting. And we also call small groups of them roost. So it's actually a noun and a verb. So what are they doing? They're roosting in the trees, and this is a roost. But down here, the overwintering sites, because the roosts are so large, the groups are so big, we actually call them a colony. So these entire overwintering sites together is called a colony of monarch butterflies. And again, when they open their wings in the sunlight to warm up, they'll turn the entire orange. That fire orange is just really beautiful. And I love this one. Do we have any guesses? What do you guys think over in Michigan? How many butterflies are on this one limb?
How many are there?
Right, 1,000, 9,000. I don't know. Like, it's impossible, right, to climb up a tree and count every single butterfly one by one. So I'll show you how they count them. But yeah, it would be impossible. It's hard to tell just by looking. But I'll show you how they do count the populations here in Mexico. And again, once they fly around when the sun comes out, it blankets the sky because there are so many monarch butterflies. And again, I'm going to show you how to tell the difference between girls and boys, and I'll show you how they count them. But first, we're going to open up the floor for some questions because I know you guys have plenty. I have questions. I have answers. Let's talk about it. And if you're watching from the outside, you're not on camera with us, make sure you're sending in your questions to either the Q&A app or to #GeoShow over on Twitter. Let's start over in Idaho with our questions. And do you guys have a question for us?
Izzy, do you have a question? Carissa, do you have a question?
Severin.
Could caterpillars eat bugs?
Do the caterpillars? No. So the caterpillars have one food source. And do you remember what it was called?
Milkweed?
Milkweed, right. So milkweed. Caterpillars eat one thing only, and that is milkweed. Milkweed, 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 milkweed. So that's really, really super important for our caterpillars, and is super because without milkweed, there will be no more, at least migrating butterflies. And so what does that look like? Well, let me just show you really quickly. I currently live and learn around the world out of the state of Maine. So I'm going to shout out Maine, and we'll show you what the local milkweed looks like here, which is going to be very similar to the milkweed in all of your homes. There are different species or different kinds of milkweed all across the country, but this is a common milkweed found in Maine, and this is what it looks like when it first sprouts up in the springtime. And so it does go dormant during the winter time, which is one of the reasons why they leave in the first place. Milkweed is kind of fuzzy, has fuzzy leaves on the bottom of it. And when you break apart a leaf, it actually has a kind of white, the white substance that comes out of it. It looks very milk-like, right? And that's where it gets its name from. People call it milkweed. And caterpillars, they eat a ton of this stuff. So when you walk around in your fields and you see milkweed in the summertime, it's all half-eaten. It's these monarch caterpillars. They are just chomping down on the milkweed. Now, the adult butterflies, I want to say, they do eat other things. Now, the adult butterflies, they will eat any drink the nectar from any flower. So the two most important things, food sources, if you guys have butterfly gardens, for example, at school, the two most important things that you can plant in your butterfly garden to help the migrating butterflies are, number one is number two, I should say, is flowers. For the adults that are heading down to Mexico, and specifically flowers that are blooming in the late summer and early fall. And the number one food source you should plant is, what do you guys think? Milkweed, right? So milkweed. So you plant that milkweed for our caterpillars, because without caterpillars, there are no adults. And this is what it looks like in the fall, right before it grows these seed pods, right before it goes dormant. And this is some milkweed in late fall. And so you can see it's starting to die out. They create these, you can see some chopping spots where caterpillars have munched down on this milkweed. And those seed pods, so this is an example of the seed pods, right before the seed pods burst, this is what they look like. And then after they burst, it's kind of like a dandelion. You know how the dandelion, the way they spread their seeds, kind of in a similar fashion. I got one here in a second. I'll split it open here. Here we go. You see, it looks like these are the seeds of the milkweed. So they spread by wind. And so as the wind blows, they will blow the seeds all across the fields. And this is how we get new milkweed for the next year. And this is, again, very, very, very important plants for the monarch butterfly, and specifically for the caterpillar, because it's the only food source of the caterpillar. Great question there. We have a question coming in from Mrs. Gullo's classroom. If that's why don't the caterpillars die if they are eating something poisonous like milkweed? So that's just the adaptation that they have. Not everything poisonous on this planet is poisonous to every single animal. So one of the adaptations of the monarch butterfly is that the caterpillars are not affected by the poison of the milkweed. And even when we look at their predators, most other insects are not affected, because the caterpillars have predators. They have lots of predators, like flying insects. Also, ants are a big predator. In fact, remember those 300 eggs that each mom lays? Less than 1% of all caterpillars actually become an adult. That's because most of those caterpillars are prey for other insects. But other insects, the poison does not affect either. So it's not just the monarch butterfly. I don't believe any insects that I'm aware of that are really affected by the poison from the milkweed. Mrs. Lee, or Maggie's from Mrs. Lee's class, wants to know if butterflies leave their eggs when they migrate. And she wants to know if they bite. Okay, all right. So monarch butterflies don't bite, and they do lay their when they migrate. The migrating butterfly does not lay eggs until now. So not until spring. So they stop mating, they stop laying eggs, they go to Mexico, hang out, and then when they come back somewhere around northern Mexico, Texas, then they'll lay their eggs and they'll die. So so they do lay their eggs, but not until the spring. Mr. or Mrs. Martin's classroom wants to know, is the monarch butterfly population in danger? Yes, we'll come back to that. Great question from there. Let's go over to Michigan. Do you guys have a question in Michigan?
Why do they all stay close to each other on the branch instead of spread out?
That's a great question. They're helping each other stay warm. They roost together. And the butterflies, this is just a strategy that they have in their colonies when they're hanging out. In fact, they're not eating in Mexico. That's why that's why flowers that flower in the fall and late summer are very important in our butterfly gardens, because the monarchs that are migrating, they live the entire winter off all of the fat that they build up from all of the nectar that they drink on the way to Mexico. So milkweed, super important. Second most important thing is flowers for our migrators that are blooming in late summer, early fall. And let's go over to Mrs. Flanagan's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us there?
Emma, do you have one? Okay, sit up. Big boy.
Can you tell if a monarch butterfly, I mean, is a boy or girl?
Boy or girl? Yeah, that's a great question. And the best way to tell you how to do that is to actually show you. So we'll do that now. I'm going to show everyone how to tell the difference between a boy and a girl. I'll talk really quickly of how they count them and the population of the monarch butterfly, and we'll jump right into our geo quiz. And for classrooms that can stay on longer, we're going to have a lightning round, because I know we have lots of questions, so many classrooms today. We can't get to every single question, but I'll get to as many as I can afterwards. So let me show you really quickly how we tell the difference between boys and girls, and how we can how we count them and what's the population doing. So first of all, if we look at this monarch butterfly, do we have any guesses here? Do you guys think, if you guys think this is a girl monarch butterfly, say, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think this is a boy monarch butterfly, say, oh yeah. All right, so this is actually a girl. And so if you said it was a girl, then you are correct. And how can I tell if they are a girl? Well, let's talk about that. Well, you can tell the difference between boy and girl monarch butterflies. So here, there's a boy and a girl right beside each other. So the girl is on the left and the boy is on the right. And the way that you can tell is, first off, if you look at the black lines that go through their wings, well, the girl on the left has really thick black lines. I like to call these Sharpie lines. And the lines on the boy is like a pencil thin lines. So that's one way that you can tell the difference between them. You also see that the male is a tad bit darker, the orange. But the number one way that you can tell, does everyone see these two black dots on the back of their wing? Yeah. Do you see those on the girl? No. So only the boys have these black spots on the back of their wing. So that is the surefire way to see if it's a girl or a boy. The quickest way for me anyways, is I look for those two black spots. And if they're there, they're a boy. If they're not, they're a female or a girl. Okay, so really quickly, how they count them and what is the population like currently of the monarch butterfly. So when they're roosting in their trees, this is the best place to come count all of the eastern monarch butterfly, because they're in one place. And so what they do is they go around and they tag all the trees that have a bunch of butterflies in them, and then they take a measurement of the area. So our younger classrooms may not have learned this yet, but we can take a measurement of something called an area. So the area is the shaded part inside the circle. So it's not the measurement around the edge of the circle, it's all of the inside of the circle. And for our older classrooms, what kind of measurements are they measuring? They're measuring, or they are taking a measure of hectares. Can everyone say hectares? So a hectare is about 2.5 acres, or the best way to think about it for me is in football fields. So American football, because we're talking about Mexico here. So football is soccer. So American football fields, about 2.5 football fields is 1 hectare. So what does that mean? Okay, so they take these measurements where the butterflies are, and scientists have determined, they've changed this over the years, but they have determined that 1 hectare of roosting butterflies equals about 50 million monarch butterflies. So what we can do is we can take a measurement of the area of roosting monarch butterflies at all of the overwintering sites, and then we take the number of hectares and we multiply that by 50 million. And that tells us how many monarch butterflies they are. Well, we've been taking, not we as in scientists have been taking measurements in Mexico since 1993-94. as you can see, what is happening to the population of monarch butterfly? Is it doing good or bad? What do you guys think? Bad. So it's not doing very well. So it's been going really, really down. And in fact, it hit the lowest point in 2013. It bumped up 2 years later in 2015-16, but over the last 2 years, it's been going back down again. So we have, or we again, as in scientists, have determined we need around 6 hectares or so for it to be a healthy population. So right now we are below 6 hectares. This year there were roughly 2.5 hectares of roosting monarch butterflies. That's down 15% from last year. And the lowest point was 0.67 hectares. Okay, and you see some of the high points. Okay, so why are their populations going down? Well, there's lots of theories for this, but some of the biggest reasons is because of agriculture practices in the US and Canada. We've gotten really good as humans with chemicals and our farming practices. We've gotten good at getting rid of weeds. And for growing food, getting rid of weeds is a good thing. But for monarch butterflies, getting rid of one weed in particular is a bad thing. So because we're able to get rid of milkweed so easily as humans, that has been bad on the monarch butterflies. So they're losing a lot of their food sources is one reason. The other reason is deforestation in Mexico, because they roost on the way down to the overwintering sites. And so illegal foresting of forest has been a problem, an issue, and climate change has been an issue as well. This last year, most people think is because there were large, huge roosts still in Canada last October. They usually are gone by September or leaving by September. So, their patterns, their migration patterns are changing because of changing weather patterns as well. Great questions from all around. I know we have plenty, but we are just over 45 minutes. So we're going to jump right into our Geo quiz for the day. We are going to stick around for a lightning round of questions if you have time to stick around with us today. So go ahead and grab your Kahoots. I'm going to skip through. We did one last survey question I didn't ask you. And do we have a healthy population of monarchs? And right now, it's no, we don't, because we're actually under 6 hectares of roosting butterflies in Mexico. Okay, every other question is worth points from here on out. So good luck, explorers. All right, first question coming up, guys, is the majority of the migrating monarchs winter in what Mexican states? Is it the state of red, Hachul, blue, Michoacan, yellow, state of Mexico, or green, the state of Chihuahua? All right, so it's blue, state of Michoacan is where the majority of the butterflies go. 80% of them go to Michoacan. Okay, do all monarchs go to Mexico? Answer blue, yes, or red, no. All right, no, they do not all go to Mexico. Remember, some go to Florida, and our western monarch butterfly goes to California. All right, Glad Bear is in the lead. Dr. Cat is in second. Great job, guys. Next question. What is the only food source of the monarch caterpillar? Is it red dandelions, blue flowers, yellow milkweed, or green smaller insects? All right, it is milkweed. Great job. Dr. Cat takes the lead. Witty Mouse in second place. All right, what do monarchs do at the overwintering sites? Do they red eat in the trees, blue roost in the trees, yellow dance in the trees, or green sleep in the trees? All right, they roost in the trees. Great job, guys. Dr. Cat's still in the lead. When do monarchs migrate to Mexico? In other words, when do they go to Mexico? When do they go to Mexico? Is it red in the fall, blue in the winter, yellow in the spring, or green in the summertime? All right, so it is red, fall. That's when they are actually traveling to Mexico, that migrating, going to Mexico. They spend the winter in Mexico. So they get to Mexico somewhere around November 1st, typically. And today's winner is Dr. Cat. Congratulations, Dr. Cat. If you are Dr. Cat's teacher, please send me your school address so I can send Dr. Cat his or her postcard. And you can only do that in one place only, and that is at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize, learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. That's the URL you see at the bottom of your screen. learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. I cannot get postcards out without a snail mail address. If you have to run, feel free to head out. Have a great day and be on the lookout. The Monarchs are coming. If you have time to stick around, we're going to open up the floor for questions. I'll get to as many as I can in a short amount of time. So Mrs. Jurian's classroom, if I'm saying that correctly, are monarch butterflies predators to any other animals? No, the only food sources that they have is the milkweed plants, and they also drink nectar out of flowers, the adults do. Okay, so great questions coming in from there. Let's see, Mr. Folk's classroom wants to know, is it, do some of them die when they are migrating? So yeah, so with the weather changes, sometimes there's storms that will blow them off course, and some of them are preyed upon, again, by those birds, especially when they are into Mexico. They get preyed upon, and I imagine some of them get hit by cars. And with the changing weather patterns, if, for example, if because it's so warm so much longer, if they're not migrating, they're just kind of hanging around up north, and then all of a sudden it gets too cold too quickly, that could kill them as well. So yeah, there are many of reasons why that could be. And let's see, other ones coming in over on. Okay, don't see any over on Twitter. We'll keep answering off our Q&A app. Let's see. Do monarchs die while migrating? Okay, a couple of questions about that. So yeah, how long is it in the chrysalis for? And that's coming from Mrs. Collins' classroom from Pleasant Hill. Shout out Pleasant Hill. And in the chrysalis stage is typically about 10 to 14 days. My monarch butterfly that I raised last summer was in the chrysalis stage for like 10 days on the dot. It was almost exactly. But again, I've heard of them going longer into the season. How many legs can they, how many eggs, not legs, how many eggs can they lay at a time? About 300, coming from Lillian. Great question, Lillian. Let's see, how long are their wings? I know the size of them. Let's see, wing to wing, they are about 10 centimeters from wing to wing. So I would say a little bit less than 5. So if we split that in half, 5 centimeters, because they have their body that's in between the wings, I would say it's a little bit less than 5 centimeters. But I don't know exactly each individual wing. And then another similar question may be, how much do they weigh? And so they weigh anywhere between 0.25 to 0.75 grams. And to let you know how much that weighs, a dime weighs 2.3 grams. So a dime weighs 2 to 3 times as much as a monarch butterfly, and a dime doesn't weigh much, right? So that'd give you an idea of how much they weigh. Let's see. So great question there. Let's see, Pennsylvania second graders would like to know, why isn't milkweed poisonous for people? It is poisonous for people. So there are ways to eat milkweed. So if you know about this, that's why you may be asking it. Don't go out there and eat milkweed. There are, indigenous techniques. People have known a long time how to use milkweed. So you can use it, and you can use it as a food source, but there's certain ways that you need to prepare it. I am not an expert in those ways, so I am not going to tell you or begin to tell you how to do that. So I can tell you, as a human, if you eat enough milkweed, you will get very sick. So it is poisonous to humans. So great question there. how do they drink their nectar? Coming from Brian from California. Great question. So their nectar, they actually have a, let me show you a picture of it. This is the best way to show you. So, so what they do is, if you ever look at the fronts of a monarch butterfly, you'll see like a big old twisted body part. And what they're doing with that is they actually will reach into the flower, down into the flower. And that's how they drink the nectar. And let's see, I think this one was fairly good. Let's go back and look at our adult butterfly that's on their flower. And so again, this particular adult was not currently drinking at the time, but I like to think that it was thinking about drinking at the time. So as I kind of go around the butterfly here, you're gonna see right on by the head, let's see, hard to get a good shot of these little guys, but you can kind of see it right here. I think I have a better picture I'll try to find for you as more questions are coming in. But essentially, right here, you have this body part that's just is curled up. And so what they do is they extend it. And this is how they reach down into the flower to reach the nectar. All right, great question there. Let's see. Don't see any other questions coming in right now. So as I find a better picture, because I think I have one somewhere of that, we'll give you a couple other things. So if any of you are interested, there are fantastic citizen science projects that you as a class can get involved with. So one of the projects or citizen science activities is to tag monarchs. So this helps with the migration, especially the migration to Mexico, with the migration patterns, where they go, when are they going. And so what you can do is you can contact organizations like monarchwatch.org, and you can get little tags from them. And so you can go out and catch monarchs. Monarchs are, because they migrate, they're not as fragile as some other monarchs. The scales on their wings don't come off as easy. So they're a safe butterfly to catch with your hands. Do it carefully, and you can put the little tag on their wing. And these tags have a little tracking number. And so if anyone else finds that butterfly and they call in where they found that butterfly, then you can track the flight patterns of the monarch butterflies. That's one thing you can do. Another one, the Monarch Lab from the University of Minnesota is another great organization doing fantastic studies with the monarch butterflies. And so one of the things that they do is they do citizen science projects where you're actually going out during the summertime and counting caterpillars and larvae or chrysalids or eggs. So they're doing more surveys of the other life stages. So not the actual migration, but how the populations in the breeding areas. So I thought this was a better picture of their mouth, but you can kind of see where it's curled up here. I think this picture I took for the eye here, you can see their eye. Here's a really cool thing. Butterflies, and I don't know if different butterflies see better than the others, but butterflies in general, they see more color. So they see a wider range of color than any other animal on the planet. So they can see lots of different colors on the spectrum with their eyes. So they have these giant eyes that can see colors really well. Talking about monarchs, when we get a close-up of their scales on their wings, they are pretty durable compared to other species of butterflies. Some other species of butterflies, is really not safe to touch them at all because they're so delicate, whereas a monarch is pretty safe to grab in your hands as long as you know you're not hurting them. And so just be careful when you catch them. And some other cool photographs if you've never seen them when they're coming out of their chrysalis. So their chrysalis, you'll generally see pictures of them when they're green, but right before they turn, so they start to, the outside of the chrysalis becomes clear, and you can actually start to see the adult butterfly inside. You get to see that orange colored pattern that they're starting to develop. And this happens fairly quickly. So when they actually emerge from the chrysalis, the first thing they do is they kind of slowly crawl out. It kind of busts open, and they crawl out and they kind of hang upside down. And what they're doing is their wings are really, they are fragile, especially early on. And so they're not rigid yet. So they hang upside down to some of their fluids in their body starts running into their wings that makes their wings more rigid. So they can't fly right when they come out. So typically they can after hanging upside down for a while. Then they'll start walking around upright, and then they're able to fly after getting their wings under them. So this is what the chrysalis looks like after it leaves. You may have found these before. And this is pretty interesting. I just think it's funny to look at different animals. But when it goes into the chrysalis stage, so the caterpillar, when it's the larvae, so when it's goes in, it is going into a chrysalis. It forms the chrysalis around its body and actually drops its head off. So this is the head of the caterpillar that it leaves behind. It drops below wherever it forms its chrysalis, which is neat. And this is poop from a caterpillar. So if you've never seen caterpillar poop, if you never
They are called the North American.
if you never raised it in your class before, they're really cute, just little balls of poop there. And that's coming from all of that milkweed they eat. So they eat tons and tons of milkweed as they are growing. They grow a lot in the larva stage, so the caterpillar stage. In fact, they'll grow, I believe it's 5,000%. Let's see, I have the correct number jotted down somewhere. I always forget this number off the top of my head. I believe it's something like 5,000% that they grow within the 2 weeks. So they are growing, constantly eating milkweed, and they are definitely hungry caterpillars. All right, so we had some other questions come in. We'll try to address some of these before we head out. When they become adults, Mrs. Magpie's classroom, when they become adults, do they ever separate from the rest of the colony? Coming from Omar. So yes, so when they become adults, they're by themselves. Really don't. Most insects, the adult stage, they really have one purpose as an adult, and that is to find another insect to mate with. In fact, some other species of insects like mayflies or some other different types of flies, some of them only live for 1 day. So they go through all the stages. They go from egg to larva to pupa, and then their adult stage is many times they come out of a pond and then they become an adult. So they come into the adult stage. They dry their wings, they fly around, they mate for 1 day, and they die. Many insects do that. The adult butterfly, the monarch butterfly, typically is 2 to 6 weeks. So they live longer than a day, of course, but their number one job when they're alive is to mate, lay eggs, and die. And then, except for the migrating generation. So every 5 generations or so, the migrating butterfly will stop laying eggs, stop mating, and head to Mexico. So it's really fascinating why they do this or how they do this. I find it amazing. How fast can they fly? Coming from Raymond. Great question. Raymond, they fly about, 18 kilometers per hour. That's about 12 miles per hour. So if you guys want to test it out, so we'll end the show on this note, but let's don't do it with pterodactyl arms. Let's do little T-Rex arms. So take your little T-Rex arms. Let's make our little wings here, and you guys can. Later on today, you can see how fast you can flap your wings and see if you can beat the record of a monarch butterfly. So little monarch butterfly, when they flap their wings, they can flap 5 to 12 flaps per second. So up to 12 flaps per second. Now, a second's not a lot of time. So 1,000. So I just did 3 flaps. How many can you do in 1 second? Go. 1, 2, 3. 1,000. How many did you get? I only got about 5 or so. So I don't know. If any of you got more than 12, then you can flap your wings faster than a monarch butterfly. All right, great questions coming from all around. Thank you so much for coming with us to Mexico to learn a little bit more about the monarch butterfly and the migration of the monarch butterfly. I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show. And until next time, guys, keep exploring. Have a great day. Bye.